What's up, everybody? Tony from Polymath Finance here. We talked about a multitude of budgets this week. You're probably sick of hearing about them, but we're going to take you through them one more time, right? We talked about the 50-30-20 method. We talked about pay yourself first, the envelope method, and everyone's favorite, the detailed budget. But now I'm going to take you through what I actually do with my family, the budget that I actually use out of these four. And it might come as a surprise, or maybe no surprise, but I use all of them. I use what I feel are the best parts from each of them, and I try to implement them into one singular budget, right? And so I use the detailed budget to get a baseline. I calculate my income, and then I calculate or aggregate my expenses that I have to pay for on a monthly basis. I save wants for last, and so I focus on that needs bucket. What am I spending? What do I have to pay for on a monthly basis? And then that way I see what's left over at the end. Based on what's left over, I then set my savings and investing goal, right? So if you think about the 50-30-20 rule, 50% for needs, 30% for wants, 20% for savings and investing. That 20% might not necessarily apply to everybody. It might not necessarily apply to me. It's really based on what's left over after you pay for all of your fixed expenses. And so I then set a target, a percentage based on what I can afford, right? And so let's say my needs bucket is 60 or 70%, well, my target's going to be 10%, and the remaining amount's going to be for wants, right? And we'll get to that in a second. And so that takes us to step number 3, right? The 50-30-20 rule, define your buckets, although it might not be 50-30-20, right? It might be, 60-30-10. It might be 70, 20-10, whatever it might be, we're going to calculate that. But again, once you set your savings and investing goal, you can then define all your buckets. Number 4, you have to practice fiscal discipline. So I kind of consider this the envelope method. Let's take groceries as an example, right? If in your budget, you say you spend $400 a month on groceries, let's try not to exceed that. And that could be tough, right? Especially with prices increasing, but we want to try to stay within that bucket, right? We want to try to stay within that envelope, that predetermined budget amount. And so I say practice fiscal discipline, right? The envelope method. And then 5, you have to track your progress, and I track my progress, right? I go through our bank accounts, I go through our credit card statements. I check my actuals against my budget just to make sure that we're staying in line with our budget, and we're not exceeding our spending too much. So if you've seen any of my videos before, this is the budget 1.0 template, right? Where we're going to calculate net income, we're going to aggregate monthly expenses, and then this is going to automatically calculate your net profit per month, right? Step number 2, aggregating your monthly expenses. I really want you guys to focus on your fixed costs, on your essentials, because we'll worry about wants in a second, and it'll all make sense when you see the whole Excel file. But we're really going to focus on what you have to spend your money on a monthly basis, so we could start defining those buckets, right? So again, you're going to calculate net income, you're going to set your needs bucket, you're going to aggregate your monthly expenses, and then this is going to calculate your net profit, but it's going to calculate what's really remaining. Step 2, this is where we're going to set our savings and investing target, right? And so quickly looking below, you can see that right now, 85% of my income is going to fixed and variable costs, which might be a little scary to see. It seems a little high, but I actually think it's a little bit more common than people think. And so if you think about the 50-30-20 rule, well, 20% of my income can't go to savings and investing because that would exceed the income that I have. Plus, it would leave no room for wants, and that's where it can get a little dicey, right? And so if 84.5% of my income is going to fixed and variable expenses, well, we know we have about 15% to play for. We know we have about 15% to play with. But we also don't want to set it at 15% because that leaves no money at the end of the month. So let's just say we want to set it at a conservative 7.5%, right? That leaves, and you can see the suggestions for wants down here, that leaves about 8% for wants. So you can do one of two things. You can set this at 8%, and then you net down to 0, or you could start to finagle a little bit and say, okay, maybe I want to set this to 10%. You see all the red flags. He can't do that. So that's conditional formatting. We set that up on purpose. So let's zero this out. And so the suggestion says, okay, 5.5% for wants. And so now you could see it on a percentage basis, but now you can also see it on a numerical basis too. You could say, all right, $500 a month is going to savings and investing, and $275 is going to wants. I guess coming back to my first point, right? If I budgeted that $275 specifically for things, well, then it feels a little bit rigid and structured. Now, going through this budget and leaving the wants for last, that 275, I know I could pretty much use for whatever I want. I could go golfing. I could buy coffees every day. I could take my wife out to dinner a couple times a month. We can play. There's a little bit more freedom in how we use that 275, right? What it also does is now you just set 10% as your savings and investing target, and you can afford that. So now you're going to prioritize, or you should prioritize that before your wants. So if maybe you spent a little bit more money on groceries and gas, and you're 85%, right down here, that 84.5% is really 90%. Well, now you still can afford your 10%, and now you just have to prioritize your savings and investing over your wants for that month. And so now coming to step 4 and 5, it's really important to track your progress, right? To practice fiscal discipline. Coming to this table over here, based on what we talked about before, we have that 10% savings and investing goal. We have $6,000 to play with. So we're going to set targets for savings, investing, and amongst other things, right? And so let's say your savings goal is $2,000. Your investing goal is $1,000. Maybe you're contributing to your 401k, and maybe that's $2,500. And then you have a personal IRA, and you want to invest $500, right? And so there's our $6,000 of savings and investing allocated. Maybe you don't want to invest, and maybe you just want to save $6,000. There's nothing wrong with that. But now you can also track your progress. So if you save $500 a month, well, the first month is $500, and then so on and so forth until you get to that $6,000. It lights up in green, and you've hit your goal, right? And so you're able to track your progress for each bucket instead of just saying, yeah, I'm just gonna allocate $6,000 for savings and investing, and then kind of forget about it. Over to the right is what I call our future envelope. So you can use the envelope method to help save for future goals. So let's say you want to go on vacation and you want to budget $2,000 for vacation. You now have that in mind, right? It's written in stone. It's written on paper. It's something to strive for. You could track your progress. Once you get to the $2,000, we don't want to now spend $3,000 on vacation. We want to say, okay, we bucketed $2,000. We saved $2,000. That's what we have for vacation. I hit that goal. Great. I can go on vacation guilt-free. Maybe you want to save for a car and you need a $5,000 down payment. $5,000 down payment. Well, now you can track that progress. Maybe you want a Rolex. I don't know. Do whatever you want. Not gonna spend less than 10 grand, but now you could track your progress for each bucket. And then maybe you want to save for each one at the same time, and you're allocating things. You're saving $6,000 for the year, and you're allocating that savings for individual items. That's one way of doing it. Or maybe you just want to do one thing at a time. Vacation first, then car, then the Rolex. To each their own. Down here we have track your progress, right? We always want to track your actuals, because a budget in theory is great, but until it's done in practice, it might not benefit you as much unless you're tracking your expenses, right? And so, a lot of these are going to be pretty consistent. They're really not going to move. Your rent and your mortgage is not going to move. But that grocery item, right? I keep coming back to that. Groceries can really fluctuate, and if you're budgeting $400 a month for groceries and you spend $600 a month for groceries, well, now how does that impact your other buckets? How does that additional $2,000, let's say we put that, $600, of course it lights up in red. How does that extra $200 impact our savings and our investing? How does that impact our wants? Do we not go out to dinner that month? Do we not get drinks with friends that month? Or are we a little bit slower for our savings target? Right? And so you're not really going to know that unless you're tracking, each item to the best of your ability. Listen, I know easier said than done, and I know it's a lot of work, but I think this is really beneficial to use. And, it doesn't have to be in this format. It doesn't have to be, in this Excel document, but some form of setting a budget, and tracking your actuals and setting a savings and investing target, I think is really important. I didn't write it down, but there's one additional thing, right? Your savings and investing goal, it can also be inclusive. It could also be inclusive of paying down debt. And so maybe instead of saving and investing, you're saying I want to pay off $5,000 of credit card debt. Well, you can include that in here, right? You could say credit card debt The target is $5,000, and now you can, write in, all right, I paid off $200 worth, $500 worth, so on and so forth, right? You could kind of lump credit card debt into this savings and investing goal, or you could say I'm paying a fixed amount every month, and you could put it in your fixed and essentials. So I know I threw a lot at you guys. I know I took you through, what seemed to be a pretty cumbersome Excel document. If you guys have any questions or comments or want me to walk through this with you, book a free session. Go to polymathfinance.com, book a free session. I will walk you through this. I will help set you up for success. If you have any questions, just send them to me. You could DM me on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, or send me an email. I'm always here to help. Please use me as a resource. I hope today was beneficial, and as always, love yous. Bye.